Hi everyone. So today we're going to go through the conduction system, and this topic is the same for OCR and AQA and EdXL. And this is looking at how an electrical impulse travels around the heart and how that then controls atrial systole, ventricular systole, and diastole. So we're going to link those two topics together, the conduction system itself, and then how it controls the cardiac cycle, because sometimes in the exam they ask about those two things together. So firstly, if you ever see the term conduction system in the question, automatically you want to be thinking, okay, I've got to mention the SA node, the AV node, the bundles of His, and the Purkinje fibres, because they're going to be the main mark points in a conduction system question. And this is the location of them here. So you've got the SA node, which is found in the wall of the right atrium. You've got the AV node that is found at the top of this bit of muscle in the middle of the heart called the septum. And then you've got the bundles of His that run down the septum, and then the Purkinje fibres that run up the walls of the ventricles. And we're going to talk about how this electrical impulse starts at the SA node and then makes its way all the way down through the Purkinje fibres and what's happening in the heart during those phases. So we'll start with the SA node, and the SA node is known as your internal pacemaker. So what that means is it's responsible for creating your heartbeat. So at the SA node, this is where an electrical impulse is generated, and the SA node releases that electrical impulse across the walls of both atria. And whenever an electrical impulse is traveling through any muscle, that causes that muscle to contract. So initially, you would say in the exam that the SA node releases an electrical impulse across the walls of the atria, and that causes atrial systole. And systole means contract. So atrial systole is when the two atria are contracting. And when the two atria contract, that forces blood down into the ventricles. And if it's asking about how the conduction system controls the cardiac cycle, you're going to want to mention what happens to blood flow if it's got cardiac cycle in the question. Because saying that the atria contract, which forces blood down into the ventricles, that's answering the cardiac cycle bit. And then saying that the SA node releases the electrical impulse, that's answering the conduction system bit. So that's what the SA node is doing. It's generating its own electrical impulse and then releasing it across the walls of the atria, causing atrial systole. Then the electrical impulse reaches this second node, which is the AV node. And when the AV node receives that electrical impulse, it holds on to it for 0.1 seconds. So it creates this 0.1 second delay whereby the electrical impulse isn't able to travel any further at the moment. And that just allows a bit more time for the atria to finish contracting so that you can get the maximal amount of blood filling up in the ventricles before the ventricles then contract. So that's the relevance of the AV node. It's creating that 0.1 second delay before allowing the electrical impulse to then travel down the bundles of His until the electrical impulse then gets to the bottom of the heart and then eventually up the Purkinje fibres. So you would say after that 0.1 second delay that is created by the AV node, you would say the electrical impulse is then released down the bundles of His up the Purkinje fibres, and then it's when the electrical impulse is travelling up the Purkinje fibres, that is when ventricular systole then occurs. So that's when the ventricles are contracting. And when the ventricles are contracting, that is then going to eject blood out of the heart. And if you wanted to be more specific, you could say, and it ejects blood out of the heart via the aorta and the pulmonary artery. But most of the time you can just say it ejects blood out of the heart. And then finally, they could ask you about how the conduction system controls diastole, and diastole is just a fancy term for relax. And if a muscle is relaxing, it means that there is no electrical impulse traveling through it. So all you'd have to say is during diastole, the SA node is not releasing an electrical impulse. There is no electrical impulse traveling through the chambers or the walls of the heart, and therefore both the atria and the ventricles are relaxed, and that is allowing blood to refill back into the heart.